It's October, season of spooks, month of monsters, and one of my favourite times of the year. In celebration, I'll be doing a series of short videos, quick looks at some of my favourite horror-themed media. For me, horror has always been about atmosphere over shock value, dread, unease, and discomfort over jump scares. That feeling of morbid curiosity where we have to know what happens next, but we don't dare to look. And it's media that evokes these feelings that I'll be exploring this month. Some will be your more typical horror. Some may be more light-hearted experiences, while still retaining that heavy horror influence. As a heads up, there will be minor spoilers, but I won't spoil the endings of anything I talk about. I simply couldn't do a series of October favourites without mentioning my personal favourite survival horror, Silent Hill. I feel when people talk about the Silent Hill series, most of the attention is directed towards Silent Hill 2, and deservedly so. With its rich storytelling, heavy symbolism, and gorgeously designed environments, it's definitely beyond just a great horror. It's a timeless classic. However, while I feel all around 2 is a better package, I can't help but have a soft spot for Konami's 1999 original. Overshadowed by its successor, it's easy to forget where it all began. Like I said, I won't be running into spoiler territory in these videos, even for a near 20-year-old game, so I'll be focusing on the one thing I think Silent Hill does better than its sequels: bare bones horror. In later games, the story seems to heavily revolve around the protagonist, with the world and the monsters being forged around them. In contrast, Harry Mason's quest to find his missing daughter feels like a small part of a much bigger picture. Within the unearthly terrors of Silent Hill, our protagonist feels just as lost as we do, and the game seems to revel in this idea, with much of its horror being focused in the realms of confusion, disorientation, and lack of understanding. It is that ambiguity that really drives us as the player to delve into Silent Hill's horrifying mysteries and explore its murky streets. Graphically, where you stand with Silent Hill will have a lot to do with your tolerance for older graphics. In this department, I hold some personal bias as I grew up on PlayStation. While I feel the game has aged gracefully, sadly it can't escape looking like it belongs on a PlayStation. Nonetheless, it's a stunning show of what the console could really do, with some gorgeous FMV cutscenes to enjoy and environments that range from simple yet impactful to incredibly elaborate, with tiny details that can be easily missed while running from the town's resident monsters. Back on the good old Sony PlayStation, it was often hard to create a sense of realism with low-res textures that were often blurry. However, this is one instance where it works heavily to the game's advantage, with rust, blood, and metal twisting together to create these incredibly grungy and frankly quite revolting environments that perfectly align with the vibe the game was going for. The foggy town itself is almost hauntingly beautiful, and were I in another universe, unrestricted and unaccompanied, I would indulge in exploring its open streets and narrow back alleys. And on the occasion, it does shift from the softness of the fog to the harshness of pitch black, with carefully chosen camera angles that serve to limit vision and make you feel as if you are being watched. It becomes absolutely terrifying. Considering the size of Silent Hill's town, it's wildly effective at making you feel claustrophobic and trapped within its realm, something that's incredibly hard to pull off considering you have an entire town to roam around in. Anytime you do get a brief reprieve from the town and the monsters, it feels far from a luxury, closed into a small, usually eerily quiet space in the knowledge that whatever you face once you go out the door will surely be worse than what you escaped coming in. Older survival horrors are some of my favourite types of games in general. I love the forced backtracking around environments, searching for clues or puzzle solutions, all while the environment often plays with you, not knowing if enemies you've killed are going to stay dead, or what you'll find through the next unlocked door, and Silent Hill is a master of this. And when it puts the general atmosphere aside and actually tries to scare you, it's fantastic at what it does. Rarely will the game try and make you leap out of your skin. It instead opts for the slow burn dread, that uncomfortable feeling that you're not alone. One great example is the cat in the school locker. We enter the room and hear a banging coming from one of the lockers. Reluctantly, we go to open it and a cat jumps out. Many games would stop here once the jump has taken place, but Silent Hill is not finished tormenting us. The cat bolts off only for this to happen. And then we are left in silence, in an empty room, knowing something terrible is on the other side of the door. This is the thing I love so much about Silent Hill's horror. It visually builds up these dark and twisted worlds full of demons, and often what's most terrifying is the things it doesn't show us, the things it causes us to conjure up in our own minds. The game plays with you further in its enemy designs, grotesque and creepy, but all still humanoid enough in their looks for you to stop and think what they might have been before they became the putrid mess on the bottom of Harry's shoes. This is very heavily brought up in a later installment, but the game even teases us with the idea that they might not be what they seem. When we are first given a gun, Sybil warns us, saying, "Know who you're shooting, and don't do it unless you have to, and don't go blasting me by mistake." Perhaps a normal thing to say to a civilian, but the "and" makes the sentence feel a little bit off. She even says Harry is the only person she's seen in the town, but the "and" implies she's not referring to herself in the first clause. If she's not, then what does she mean by it? Maybe I'm looking a little bit too deep here, but we are even told not to fire unless we have to. And actually, aside from the bosses, you can just run past every enemy. It's one thing to creep me out with monsters, but to make even the idea of killing them unsettling is something I really have to give the game props for. Speaking of unsettling, Silent Hill's unique soundtrack is fantastic at being just that. While its main theme is incredibly iconic, and probably what most people would think of when the score is mentioned, it's the in-game music that really completes the atmosphere. Gone is the melancholy melody of the beautiful Spanish and electric guitars, in exchange for a cacophony of metallic industrial pounding and screeching, mixed with distorted white noise. I've never played a game with such an aggressively oppressive soundtrack. There is not one moment of calm to be had while accompanied by any of these insanely twisted pieces of music. For me, an almost greater form of stress than anything lurking in the darkness, and I often find myself longing for silence or the simple crackling of my radio. I couldn't finish the video without talking about our main character, Harry Mason. In most other comparable games, you are some kind of soldier or detective, someone with an ability to properly protect themselves. Harry Mason's most defining characteristic is that he is a dad, and he feels like a dad. This is one of the rare occasions I adore those old tank controls. Best used in the game's opening sequence, the static camera angles are tilted and almost nauseating when navigating with controls based on player direction. It's so frantic and unsteady, it's brilliant for a dream sequence, or nightmare in Harry's case. There is not one moment while playing where I feel strong or overpowered, and being cornered in a room or grabbed by an enemy can send me from calm to full-on panic in a matter of seconds. Harry Mason's animations play a big part in this too. He doesn't wield weapons like an experienced veteran. He looks far more like he's going for a round of golf with the steel pipe than being ready to bash an enemy's skull in. Being sloppy while walking around certain environments causes him to trip and fall, or bash into walls, and even using the backstep to your advantage feels more like an accidental fluke than a tactical dodge. Harry isn't totally alone on his journey. As we progress, we bump into the game's various side characters. While it's comforting to come into contact with another human, frequently we are left feeling more empty and alone than before we met them. Most seem just as lost or confused as we do, and those that are helpful have their own agendas and seem all too eager to leave us. While Silent Hill's story is a little on the vague side, the game's multiple endings based off helping certain characters is a fantastic way to make these interactions a thing of importance. Miss a vital item or piece of information and it will come back to haunt you in the end. This manages to make Silent Hill such an intense experience, I found myself morbidly engrossed in its world almost instantly. Rare is it that a game set out to purely make me feel unease, fear and stress would pull me in so much that I couldn't put it down. It marks the start of an amazing series of games and created a totally unforgettable experience. Truly a must-play for all horror fans, Silent Hill definitely helped set the bar for survival horror as a genre. It will always be a favourite of mine, and I'll always find myself drawn back to its confined hallways and foggy streets.